My name is Hank Mercer. I'm 54 years old, and I still remember exactly how the air felt in that conference room the moment Floyd Calloway pointed at me. 30 people in the room. Some of them colleagues I'd worked alongside for years, a few clients who had come in for the quarterly update, and Floyd standing at the front with his laser pointer, looking straight at me when he said it. The dead weight in this room is the reason we lost that bid. Nobody moved. The projector hummed. I watched 3 people look down at their notebooks at the same time, the way people do when they don't want to be noticed noticing something. A couple of others looked straight at me, waiting to see what I'd do. A few smiled, not big smiles, just that small, uncomfortable kind people make when they don't know what else to do with their face. The silence went on longer than it should have. 10 seconds that felt like a full minute. I sat there and didn't say a word. 7 years I'd given to Altitude Marketing Solutions. 7 years of picking up the phone at 11 at night when a client had a problem that couldn't wait. 7 years of building something real, one relationship at a time, while someone else took the credit and the bonus check. I want to tell you what happened next. But first, let me take you back a little. I didn't plan on staying at Altitude this long. When I joined at 47, I figured it was a 2 or 3 year stop. I turned down 2 other offers that year because the timing wasn't right, and Altitude needed someone who actually understood how to manage client relationships, not just pitch and disappear. The work was real, and the clients were serious, so I stayed. Floyd was already the marketing director when I arrived. He had an easy confidence that came across well in a room. He could walk into a meeting with a skeptical CFO and walk out with a handshake. I respected that. Not everyone can do it. What I didn't understand at first was that Floyd's real talent wasn't marketing strategy or client development. It was managing the people above him while quietly taking credit for the people below him. The first time it happened, I almost let it go. I'd spent 3 weeks developing a retention strategy for one of our accounts. Floyd presented it to the executive team without mentioning my name once. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that he probably just forgot in the moment. The second time, with a different client and a different deck, I knew it wasn't an oversight. It was the system. I needed the job. My son was finishing his last year of college. I had a mortgage and benefits I couldn't afford to lose, so I did what a lot of guys in my position do. I kept my head down. I kept working, and I started keeping records. Every email where a client thanked me directly. Every text message where someone called my personal cell because they trusted me more than the main office line. Every project summary with my name on the technical input. I saved all of it, printed copies in a binder, digital backups on a personal drive. I kept the binder in the bottom drawer of my desk, and I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't know exactly when I'd need it. I just knew the day would come. The relationship with Patrice Dunmore at Westridge Group started the way most real business relationships do, not through a formal pitch or a scheduled meeting, but by accident and by showing up. It was an industry conference 2 years into my time at Altitude, a full-day session on infrastructure investment that most people in our office skipped because Floyd called those events a waste of time. I went because I figured if clients were going, I should be there too. Patrice ran the CFO track that afternoon. Sharp, direct, the kind of person who asks the question everyone else in the room was thinking but didn't want to say out loud. We ended up at the same table during the lunch break. She was frustrated with a vendor management issue her team had been dealing with for months. I'd seen the same problem at 2 other accounts and told her exactly what had worked. No pitch, no positioning, just a straight answer to a real problem. By the end of the day, we'd exchanged cards. A month later, Westridge signed with Altitude. Floyd sent a company-wide email about finally breaking through on a target account. I added the original email thread to my binder and moved on. That was how it worked for 7 years. I built the relationships. Floyd got the credit, and I kept documenting every bit of it. Patrice called my cell directly, never the main line. She'd text on Sunday afternoons when something was on her mind about an upcoming project. She'd introduced me to 2 other CFOs in her network, both of whom became clients. In the internal system, Floyd was listed as the account manager for Westridge. In reality, Patrice hadn't had a substantive conversation with Floyd in over a year. By the time of that quarterly meeting, 14 of our 18 major accounts worked that way. The clients called me. The system credited Floyd, and Floyd collected the retention bonuses every quarter like clockwork. My colleagues saw it too. Otis Greer in creative, Cecile Harmon in analytics, Ned Callahan in crisis management. All 3 of them had watched their best work get folded into Floyd's presentations and come out on the other side as his ideas. We didn't talk about it much, just enough for everyone to know we were all seeing the same thing. We stayed because we needed to stay. Until the day we couldn't anymore. I met Patrice Dunmore at an industry conference in Columbus about 2 years into my time at Altitude. One of those full-day events where half the room is checking their phones and the other half is actually there. Floyd never came to those. He said the ROI wasn't worth the drive. I figured the ROI was exactly why I kept going. Patrice was CFO at Westridge Technologies, a mid-size firm that nobody at Altitude had been able to get a meeting with for over a year. I didn't know that when I sat down across from her at lunch. We started talking about vendor management, then budget cycles, then the gap between what consultants promise and what they actually deliver. She was direct, no nonsense, the kind of person who decides in the first 5 minutes whether someone is worth her time. By the end of lunch, she said, "Your firm has been sending us pitch emails for 14 months. I know," I said. "I'm sorry about that." She laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. 3 weeks later, Westridge signed with Altitude. Floyd announced it at the next staff meeting like he'd personally closed the deal. I didn't say anything. I went back to my desk and sent Patrice a note, thanking her for giving us the shot. She replied in 4 minutes. That's when I knew the relationship was real. Over the next 2 years, I became the person she called, not the main line, not Floyd's assistant, me. When Westridge had a budget decision that touched our work, she called. When her team had a concern at 8 on a Friday night, she called. I always picked up. Floyd knew her name, he knew her company. But he didn't know her assistant's name, didn't know her fiscal year ran March to March, didn't know she had a standing rule against meetings before 9 a.m. I knew all of it because I'd paid attention. That's not a skill you're born with. It's just what you do when you actually care whether a client succeeds. That was the thing Floyd never understood. He thought client relationships were about charm. Walk in confident, say the right things, close the room. And sure, that gets you the first meeting, but it doesn't get you the call at 8 on a Friday that takes something else. I had that same kind of relationship with 13 other accounts, not because I was running some strategy, because I showed up, did the work, and remembered that on the other end of every contract was a person who needed things to actually get done. Floyd's performance reviews kept coming back strong. Exceptional client retention. Outstanding account management. The bonuses reflected that. I knew the real numbers. So did Otis, Cecile, and Ned. We just didn't have anywhere to put that knowledge that would matter until I started putting it in a binder. Not all at once. It built up over time, an email here, a client sign-off there. I printed things, saved files, kept a running document with dates and names. I didn't do it because I had a plan. I did it because something told me that if the day ever came where I needed to prove what I'd actually built, a verbal account wasn't going to be enough. Anybody can say anything. Timestamps don't lie. By the time Floyd called me dead weight in front of 30 people, that binder had 3 years of documentation in it. The 7 days between walking out of that conference room and walking into the boardroom were the strangest week I'd had in a long time. I came back to work the next morning like nothing had happened, because the alternative was sitting at home second-guessing myself, and I'd never been good at that. Floyd avoided me completely. I could feel the rest of the office waiting to see which way things would fall. On the 3rd day, Otis caught me in the break room. He kept his voice low. "Whatever you're doing," he said, "I'm with you." Cecile and Ned, too. We talked. I told him I appreciated it. He nodded and went back to his desk. That was the whole conversation. It was enough. At home each night I worked on the presentation, not slides full of bullet points. Actual data, client interaction logs, documented outcomes, financial projections showing what the restructuring would mean for retention rates over 18 months. I pulled numbers from the CRM, cross-referenced them with my own records, built a side-by-side comparison of what our internal systems showed versus what was actually happening with each account. I also called Patrice. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her enough. Changes might be coming at Altitude, I said. I wanted her to know directly from me. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Hank, I'll be honest with you. We're with Altitude because of you. That's not a threat, it's just a fact. Whatever you need from me, you have it." I thanked her, wrote down the date and time of the call, and added it to the file. I called 2 other clients that week. Got similar responses from both. Not coordinated, not strategic. Just people telling me the truth when I asked them directly. The night before the board meeting, I sent Loretta an email with everything attached, the full documentation, the client statements, the financial projections. Every board member would have a copy at their seat before I walked in. Floyd wouldn't know that until he sat down. I closed my laptop around 11, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the window for a while. 7 years of work was either going to mean something tomorrow or it wasn't. I went to bed. I slept fine. The boardroom was on the top floor. 10 people around the table when I walked in, 8 board members, Loretta and the company's legal counsel. Floyd was already there. He'd taken the seat closest to the presentation screen, which was exactly where I expected him to be. I watched his face when he sat down and opened the folder at his place. His expression didn't change much, but he read the first page, then the second, and by the third he set it down and didn't pick it up again. He knew what it was. He knew I'd sent it ahead. Loretta opened the meeting without a lot of ceremony. She introduced me, said I'd proposed a restructuring of the client service model, and turned it over. I connected my laptop, pulled up the first slide, and started talking. I didn't open with numbers. I opened with a question. How many of you have spoken directly with Patrice Dunmore at Westridge in the last 12 months? Nobody raised a hand. Patrice Dunmore manages a $2.4 million annual contract with this firm. In the last 12 months, she has called my personal cell 34 times. She has exchanged 91 emails with me directly. She has had 3 conversations with Floyd Calloway, all of them in group settings where I was also present. I let that sit for a second. Then I moved to the next slide. For the following 20 minutes, I walked them through the data, account by account, who was listed in our CRM as the primary contact, who the client actually called, the last substantive conversation Floyd had with each account versus the last one I had. The pattern was the same across 14 of our 18 major accounts. The people listed as account managers weren't managing the accounts. I was, or Otis was, or Cecile, or Ned. The board members were quiet in the way people get quiet when they're recalibrating. When I finished, Virgil Stanton, the board chairman, looked down at his folder and then looked at Floyd. Mr. Calloway, he said, Westridge had a project scope issued 2 weeks ago. Walk me through how that was resolved. Floyd didn't miss a beat. The scope was clarified in a follow-up meeting with their team. Who ran that meeting? A pause. Small, but there. The details were handled at the coordinator level. Virgil nodded slowly. The email chain in this folder shows Hank ran that meeting, drafted the resolution memo, and got sign-off from Patrice Dunmore the same afternoon. Your name isn't in the thread. Floyd said nothing. Virgil set the folder down. Thank you, Mr. Calloway, your presentation. Floyd stood up and adjusted his tie. I'll give him this. He didn't look rattled. He clicked to his first slide like a man who'd done it 1,000 times, because he had. His argument was clean. Acquisition drives growth. The current structure allows specialization visionaries who bring clients in, support personnel who handle day-to-day communication. Disrupting that creates instability. Clients value knowing a director is overseeing their account even when coordinators handle routine matters. He said the word visionary 3 times. I counted. A few board members nodded. I understood why. It was a coherent argument if you didn't know the underlying reality. Floyd had spent 7 years making sure nobody knew the underlying reality. When he finished, both of us were asked to wait in the hallway while the board deliberated. We stood maybe 10 feet apart. Neither of us said anything for the first few minutes. Then Floyd spoke without looking at me. You've been building this for a while. I've been doing my job for a while, I said. He was quiet after that. We were called back in after about 12 minutes. Loretta stood rather than sitting, which I took as a sign she'd already decided what she wanted this to look like. She ran through the board's decision without softening it much. New client relationship department, effective immediately. Transparent attribution of account responsibilities. Compensation adjusted to reflect actual client management. I would lead it, reporting directly to her. Then she turned to Floyd. Your experience in presentation and new business development is an asset to this company, she said. You'll transition to a new business development role, focused on acquisition. Once accounts are brought in, they transfer to Hank's department. The demotion was dressed up carefully, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. Floyd would no longer control existing accounts. He would no longer receive retention bonuses for relationships he didn't maintain. He would have to actually go find new clients, which required doing work he'd spent 7 years delegating. His jaw tightened once, then he nodded. Loretta looked at the room. Full cooperation is expected from all parties during the transition. The board will review progress in 90 days. Walking out of that boardroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time at that job. Not satisfaction exactly. More like the specific relief of a thing being settled, like a debt that had been sitting on the books for years finally getting paid. 2 hours later, Loretta called an all-staff meeting. The whole company packed into the large conference room, the same room where Floyd had called me dead weight 9 days earlier. She announced the restructuring with the kind of executive calm that makes big changes sound inevitable rather than contentious. New department, new leadership structure. When she said my name, I heard a few people shift in their chairs. When she said Otis Greer would lead creative services, Otis looked at the table for a second, like he hadn't fully believed it until that moment. When she said Cecile Harmon would head analytics, Cecile pressed her lips together and nodded once. When she said Ned Callahan would direct crisis management, Ned just crossed his arms and stared straight ahead, but I knew him well enough to see the difference. Floyd's new title went unannounced. Everyone noticed. The first 3 weeks after the restructuring were not smooth. I hadn't expected them to be. 2 senior managers pushed back hard. One of them, a guy named Bart Whitfield, who'd been at Altitude 11 years, told Loretta directly that he wasn't going to submit to a client interaction audit. He said it would undermine his authority with the accounts he managed. Loretta told him the audit was happening regardless and asked if he wanted to be part of the transition or not. He quit the following Friday. The other one, a woman named Alma Briggs from the West Coast accounts team, threatened to resign, then sat in on her first audit session and discovered that her junior associate had been running 3 of her 5 accounts almost entirely without her. The junior associate got a promotion. Alma stayed, and to her credit, stopped complaining. Floyd's adjustment was the one I watched most closely. Not out of satisfaction. More because I needed to know whether the restructuring was actually going to work or whether he'd find a way to route around it. The first month, he struggled. Without Otis prepping his creative materials, without Cecile's market analysis handed to him the day before a pitch, without me handling the technical follow-up that made his proposals look airtight, his presentations were thin. He lost 2 pitches back-to-back in the first 6 weeks. The clients went with competitors who came in better prepared. He showed up at my office door on a Tuesday morning in the second month. No jacket. That was unusual for Floyd. I need to talk about the Greystone pitch, he said. I gestured at the chair across from my desk. I can't build the financial modeling section without Cecile's input, he said, and the creative direction needs Otis. I don't have access to either of them directly anymore. You do, I said. You submit a project brief through the department intake. They're assigned based on capacity. Your name goes on the pitch as originator. Their names go on the sections they produce. He looked at me for a second. That's not how it used to work. No, I said, it's not. He was quiet. I waited. Fine, he said. How do I submit the brief? I walked him through it. It took about 10 minutes. He didn't say thank you when he left, but he didn't argue either. I marked that as progress. The Greystone pitch came together over 3 weeks. Otis built the creative deck. Cecile ran the market analysis. I reviewed the client relationship strategy before it went out. Floyd presented. He was good at that part, always had been. The client signed a 6-month trial contract. At the internal announcement, Floyd said something I hadn't heard from him before. He said the pitch worked because of the team behind it, and he named Otis and Cecile specifically. The room was quiet for a moment in the way rooms get quiet when something unexpected happens. Otis caught my eye across the room. I gave him nothing back. But I noticed the 90-day board review landed better than I'd projected. Client satisfaction scores up 22%. Staff turnover down by more than half compared to the same period the prior year. 3 accounts that had been quietly shopping around signed extended contracts, including one that Patrice Dunmore had personally referred to us after telling the client, and I'm quoting her directly here, Altitude finally figured out how to run itself. Virgil Stanton looked at the numbers for a long moment and said, transparency appears to agree with us. After the review, Loretta asked me to stay back. She closed the door and told me the board had authorized a new executive position, Chief Client Officer, a seat at the table, policy authority, not just implementation. I told her I'd review the details over the weekend. Walking to my car that evening, I called my son, Drew. He was 24, 8 months into his first real job at a logistics firm in Cincinnati, still figuring out how offices actually worked versus how he'd been told they worked. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, how'd it go? Good, I said. It went the way it was supposed to go. He was quiet for a second. Did they give you the thing? They offered it. I haven't said yes yet. Dad, he said it the way he'd been saying it since he was about 16. Equal parts affection and impatience. I'll say yes, I said. I just don't like being rushed. He laughed. I drove home with the windows down. 6 months after that quarterly meeting, I stood at the podium during the annual company gathering and looked out at a room that didn't much resemble the one I'd walked out of. Otis was in the front row with 3 people on his creative team that he'd hired himself. Cecile was next to him, running the analytics department she'd built from 2 people to 5. Ned was in the back with his arms crossed, half smiling the way he always did. And Floyd was at a table near the side wall, leaning forward while a junior guy from his team walked him through a pitch deck, actually listening, taking notes. I gave the numbers: record growth, retention up, new accounts in the pipeline. Then I said the one thing I'd been thinking about for 6 months. A year ago, I sat in this room and got told I was the dead weight. Today, I'll tell you what I told my son when he asked how it went. It went the way it was supposed to go, because the work was always there, it just needed somewhere to stand. Nobody gave a standing ovation or anything like that. But when I walked off the stage, Otis shook my hand and held it for a second longer than a normal handshake. That was enough. Later, near the door, Floyd stopped me. "That was a good presentation," he said. "Thanks." He shifted his weight. "I've been meaning to say, I was wrong about you, about what you were actually doing here." It wasn't a full apology, but from Floyd Calloway, it was the closest the man was ever going to get to one. I nodded. He walked back to his team. I stood there for another minute, then I went home. If you've spent years building something real, clients who trust you, results that actually hold up, a reputation earned the hard way, and watched someone else take credit for it, then you already know exactly how this felt. Not just the anger. The specific exhaustion of being underestimated by people who needed you more than they admitted. Here's what I learned. You don't have to blow anything up. You just have to document, stay patient, and wait for the moment when the truth is too large to talk around. That moment always comes. If this story hit close to home, leave a comment below. Tell me what happened. Tell me how you handled it. Someone reading right now needs to hear that they're not alone in this, and that staying quiet while you build your case is not the same thing as giving up.